sons and daughters go and get mom and dad and bring mom and dad to live back with them, which is great. But then that community that mom and dad had created over 10, 20, 30, 50 years is gone. So they maybe lose their church community, their neighborhood community, their friend community. And so now you need to put a lot of work. Just coming and living with your daughter and watching the kids go to school and the kids come home is not enough. That's not going to be in that thriving.
Welcome back to our Aging Well at Home series. This month, we're focusing on connection and family conversations because aging well isn't only about physical health or safety, it's about emotional health, cognitive health, and overall quality of life and what may bring your loved one joy. And one of the biggest challenges we see with older adults is isolation. Something that often happens gradually and quietly. And it's a conversation we're going to have today with Elizabeth Williams, the Executive Director of Mountain Aging Partners. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us and having a conversation. Tell us a little bit more about you and your program.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. I'm Elizabeth Williams, and I worked for Mountain Aging Partners, and we do so many cool things in the community. And one of those, at the core of it, is really about community and connection. Our vision is no one ages alone, and this is something that is personally meaningful and important to me. I choose to work here locally, not to have a remote job, to be here supporting my community, knowing my community, being part of my community. And that's feels really good to me, living my values in that way, as well as like pretty much everybody on the team. So we want to be creating that community and connections, not just for ourselves and our team members, but also doing that for our older adults and the caregivers. And so that's why I love this conversation around connection and healthy aging.
Wonderful. So, how do we know if someone is becoming socially isolated and it's not just aging? How do we know the difference if someone is withdrawing and may need some more interaction?
So there's a difference between loneliness and social isolation. And so loneliness is the feeling of feeling alone, even if you are with people or if you're on your own. So anybody can be lonely, and that is kind of at the core of being socially isolated. But there's a lot of things that happen as you age that can kind of build in social isolation. So some of the early signs are subtle. You might notice someone withdrawing from activities that they used to enjoy, or missing appointments, or connecting less frequently. Other signs include change in mood, maybe increased anxiety or depression, or even physical changes like poor nutrition or neglecting personal care. And isolation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just like the slow shrinking of someone's world. And there are several natural changes that can happen with aging that can increase that risk of social isolation. And most of them are gradual. The first one, and a big one, I shouldn't say the first one, but a big one is loss. So it can be loss of a spouse, loss of friends, loss of a sense of purpose. And so again, it's that over time, the social circles can shrink without people even realizing it. Maybe friends are moving away, so maybe not just death, but people are moving, and there can be a lot of loss in that. Another factor is health and mobility. So some of the chronic conditions that can come with aging. So like vision is obviously very debilitating, and it's going to shrink your world. Hearing loss, not being able to go out to restaurants maybe, or being in large groups of people because if you're having trouble hearing, difficulty driving, all of those things that can happen with aging can make that world smaller. Also, transportation, when someone can no longer drive or they don't have reliable alternatives, their worlds can become really small really quickly. There's also some environmental factors. So like living alone is a key indicator for social isolation. Being in a rural area, not having family or uh, family or friends nearby can also increase that. I think it's important to understand is that isolation usually isn't caused by one thing. It's like a combination of small changes that build over time. And it takes a lot of time and effort to continue connection and community. So, like, it's a lifelong journey. It's not like, oh, these are my friends, this is my connection, and that everything stays, right? Everything continues to shift. And so you need to constantly be building it.
That's a great point. Absolutely. We can't just get to a place and go, okay, the social component is now complete, Elizabeth. Let's now focus on this one. No, I
Right.
agree. And I think that's a mistake a lot of us make is we think we have our network of friends and may it be book club, may it be church, may it be a walking club, may it be hiking. And then we're like, okay, we're good. And we don't ever kind of step back and reevaluate that. So I think that's a great component of having that and looking at that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, just like our health, like, right? Like, you have to continuously, oh, I need to eat more vegetables. Oh, I need to eat more fruit. You need to continuously be reminding and doing and putting effort into it. And it's the same thing for social isolation. It's the same thing for social connection, community connection. You continuously have to be putting effort into it.
So social isolation, loneliness, depression. How do you see those three? They're all kind of tied together. I completely understand. But how do you see each of those maybe defined for yourself?
So I would say depression is like a byproduct of possibly being lonely or socially isolated. And it doesn't have to be, you can have chemical changes in the brain and have depression, but it's not being in the state of thriving, right? So I think it's great to be thinking of like spring flowers, right? So someone who's depressed is not blooming, they're not getting watered, they're not getting the sun, and they're shrinking and flat, and it's kind of at the core of both loneliness and being socially isolated. And again, loneliness is the feeling of not being connected, and I've done a talk on this, in the community around a lot of the factors that lead to that feeling of not being connected, so it's a big thing to kinda unknot, but you can be lonely and have I know a lot of lonely people, and on the outside, they seem to be doing all the right things, right? They're going to the book group, they have a church community, but they still have that a loneliness inside of them. So you can not be socially isolated and still be lonely. And there's lots of things you can do to dig into that. The social isolation is really that small world. So either it's physical, you're not able to hear or see or walk or drive or do something to get you connected to other people, or your husband has passed away, or your best friend has passed away, or your best friend has moved. One thing I see a lot of that leads to this is sons and daughters go and get mom and dad and bring and dad to live back with them, which is great. But then that community that mom and dad had created over 10, 20, 30, 50 years is gone. So they maybe lose their church community, their neighborhood community, their friend community. And so now you need to put a lot of work just coming and living with your daughter and watching the kids go to school and the kids come home is not enough. That's not gonna be in that thriving. So, there's a lot of things that can cause that social isolation, and it takes a lot of work to be connected to folks.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to describe that is that you can be in a book club, but still have that feeling of loneliness and not being connected. Absolutely. Let's talk about what family and caregivers can do to help someone stay community connected and socially connected.
So there are a lot of options, and they obviously vary by community, but they also vary by what the person's desires are. And it takes some work. So it's not a one and done kind of thing. So it takes some trial and error, particularly if you're that son or daughter who's brought mom and dad to live with you. And now they're having to go out to the community in a new way and try to get connected with folks. So, one, there's community meal programs. So most communities have community dining programs. Those community dining programs are social connection groups. So they're folks that go there every day. There are folks that go there 3 or 4 times a week and share meals. There's a gentleman that started a few weeks ago because he was a widower and he never really learned to cook, so he could make, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and pour a bowl of cereal, but he really didn't have, like, cooking skills because his wife did all of that. So he comes to the community dining program, and he's getting a hot meal, but he's also meeting with other widowers who have lost their spouse, and that's a being able to sit across from a table from someone else who's lost their spouse of 30 or 40 years, like, you're not gonna be able to have that conversation with anybody else in the same way that you're having with them. So it's that peer group that understands where you are in life. It might also be that you're sitting across from someone else who their daughter has moved them from Chattanooga to Hendersonville or Asheville, and now they've lost their connection, and now you can talk about, oh, how bossy your daughter is or how she's taken over your life, or again, it's like it's a peer group of having a shared experience, and there's nothing else like someone who understands, really understands, and not just says, "Oh, that sounds horrible."
Right. That validates them, that's kinda living, like, in that moment that they're having.
Yeah, and we go through life with our peer group, right? Like, there's so many things we do with our peer group at the same time, right? You graduate high school, you get married, you have children, da 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 da. But when you're older, that peer group could shrink, and so it's a great to remember that there's still experiences that it's really nice to say as you validate your experience and understand your experience. The other way, so one of my favorites that I mentioned earlier is adult day services. So just because you're having physical or cognitive issues, and that's who we really support in the adult day programs, just because you're having physical and cognitive issues doesn't mean you don't need social connection. It doesn't mean you don't need purpose. It doesn't mean you don't need to be part of a community. It's harder to get those needs met because of the changes that are happening physical or cognitively, but that's what adult day services are for. We see that we talk about this, the person that comes in who's that wilted flower who just hasn't had that social engagement, and they just bloom. It feels like they're being watered because we most of us are very social creatures and we like being together in groups. The other thing, volunteers, there's so many volunteer organizations that need volunteers. I think this is great for people to understand and know. We have 2 thrift stores. Our thrift stores are run by a small team, but they're also run by a huge team of volunteers, and those volunteers that work at that thrift store, they are essential to our mission. The thrift stores provide hundreds and thousands of dollars in revenue every year to make sure that everyone who needs a meal, that we can keep adult day costs down, that we can be running these community dining programs, the information programs. So volunteers are essential to nonprofits. And we all need great volunteers. So go find a volunteer group or a program that fits what you want. Churches, spiritual community, shared interest groups. There's lots and lots and lots of things to help you connect with your community. And I think it's also important to remember it doesn't have to be powerful or big or formal or structured, I should say, to be powerful. So I hear all the time from the bank teller that talks to me about the older adult who just comes in once a week and talks to them for 20 minutes. And they know that adult is coming in to talk to them for 20 minutes because they're not necessarily lonely or isolated, but it's a connection, right? They're there to
Mhm.
connect. That happens at our thrift stores. We have people who just come in and browse, but they're there to actually talk and talk to the volunteers and talk to the folks at the front. So that all those little things that are happening all the time in our community too. And so be kind when you see an older adult, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Anybody, right? Be kind.
Right. Right,
Mhm.
absolutely. If we could learn anything from COVID, it would be that, is that the social connection and the looking at someone and talking with someone is so very, very important. And those little touches that, yeah, it may be a caregiver coming in the house, it may be a meal that's being delivered, but it's still that connection of human to human, of hi, how are you doing? and connecting with them. That is such a good point to point out. And I love the thought of volunteering because, like you said, those are things that we need to start doing now. And that is talks about what we had talked about before,
Mhm.
about the conversations, about having those conversations, what's meaningful to your aging loved one, and finding out what's important. So that's a great way. I have a question that is family members, do they go with their loved ones to the community meals or is there transportation to the community meals? Tell me a little bit more about the community meal program.
Yeah, so families don't go. It's just the client and you need to be over I think it's 60. And it's funded through Older American Act funding, so there's no cost for the meal. We do take donations, so if you financially want to support the work in the program, you can contribute, but there's no cost for the meal. And there is transportation to the community meals and to the adult day programs here in Henderson. It's WNC Source. And in Buncombe, it is Mountain Mobility will bring folks to those programs.
Wonderful. And they can learn more about all of these programs by visiting Mountain Aging Partners. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Wonderful. How can a family recognize when declining strength is starting to impact their loved one in the house, their safety in the home?
Declining strength,
Strength. Hmm.
physical strength.
Well, I think that's a great point, Elizabeth. I think talking about physical strength and or the isolation that we're talking about and the social connections and how that all impacts them in their home. A family member visits from out of town, and how can they tell that they need to get involved with their loved one and get more community support, more connection for them, for their loved one?
So a great way is to be coming in and trying to doing 2 things at once, and so that's fresh eyes. So looking at the space with fresh eyes as to what looks okay here, what doesn't look okay here. If this was someone else's home, I might be worried or concerned about this versus, "Oh, that's just dad."
Okay.
But then also understanding like, "Oh, that's just dad," right? So if your father never washed the dishes and always left them into the sink, like, yep, there's gonna be dishes in the sink, right? So that's typical and normal for your father, and so that doesn't mean there's an indicator that something is going on. So it's really looking for things that are different, things that don't seem safe, things that are concerning, so that's that fresh eyes of just
Yes.
you go into your family home or the home you grew up in or your parents' home and, you don't really see it or look at it. So looking at through those fresh eyes and making sure that, if they were really, really tidy, is the house still tidy? So then if not, something's probably going on. Did your dad always have the grass mowed to this height and now it's not? Oh, something might be going on. Also, was your dad like a do-it-yourselfer or your mom like, did everything? And so making sure that if they are still doing those things, like maybe changing light bulbs or trimming trees, their physical body's not going to be the same at 70, 80, 90 as it was at 50, 60, 30.
Right.
So just because your dad always did it doesn't mean that he's still gonna be able to do it because your body really is physically changing. My dad is 81 and he bought a brand new motorcycle at 80. He was really excited about it. We were all really pleased for him that he's so physically fit that he can be riding a motorcycle and buying one at 80, but concerned about how long he's driving for, right? He wants to do
Hmm.
a long distance ride, and I'm like, I really it makes me nervous, like, driving around the hood, sure, I know you love it, but don't drive, 3 states away.
Right. Right. And once again, we circle back to having those open conversations and those hard conversations that we may need to. I love what you said about a fresh set of eyes because I have two siblings who live out of town and they come to visit my mom and they don't always see what I see. And so I think, once again, having those conversations with your family, with or without your mom, to see what everybody is seeing. What advice would you give to siblings that are seeing their parent, their loved one differently?
So what you're talking about is pretty common, right? Like, everyone is gonna look at it a little different. There's also the factor of, like, when I know when my grandmother, who had cognitive issues, when her kids would come and visit from out of town versus my mom, who was there all the time, my grandmother would stand up a little straighter. She pulled it all together, and she was able to present a lot better in that brief period of time that they were there, and that's great, and that's part of why it's great to have social interactions with people, right? Because how you are at home, maybe slouched out on the couch,
Mhm,
versus if you're at the mall walking around, right? There's a difference. It's
mhm,
exercise in some ways, but your family member is probably gonna do that when people come from out of town, and so just having that conversation with your siblings and talking about, "Yeah, this is how mom's looking today, and this is mom at her best. This is
right.
not mom at her worst, and mom has great days and not so great days, and they look different, and you're getting to see her at her best." And so really just trying to understand what each of the siblings, how they wanna be helping caring for their your parent, what is important to them about it, what do they know is important to your mom about it? So it's just those conversations, that you're talking about, but allowing everybody to express what's important to them, what they can do, how they can contribute, and coming up with a plan that supports them. Because one sibling might wanna do everything, and one sibling might not wanna do anything. One sibling might be like, "I'm never helping dad in the shower." The other sibling might be like, I can help dad in the shower."
Okay.
So finding where everyone's strengths are, how much time they wanna be spending, what's important to them, how they wanna be there for their parent. "I wanna fully be there. I'm gonna move. No, I need to, I need to take care of myself. I need to be taking care of my own life." And so having those deep conversations with everybody that's part of that support network. So if anything happens or when something happens, everyone had the opportunity to say what they needed and what they could do and how they could help.
That's well said. Very, very well said. In closing, what other thoughts would you like to share on the conversation of being at home and isolating and social connections with our listeners?
I'm gonna go back to, I think it's important to understand that isolation isn't usually caused by one thing. It's a combination of small things that build over time. And that's why early connection and community are so important. And again, it takes a lot of work to continue those connections and be part of community. And it takes a plan. So at the heart of this is that one simple idea that aging is possible, but it takes planning, connection, and community, and no one has to do it alone.
I love that. Say that one more time. I just love that, Elizabeth.
At the heart of all of this is one simple idea that aging in place is possible, but it takes planning, connection, and community, and no one has to do it alone.
Well, Elizabeth, with Mountain Aging Partners, I can't think of a better way to wrap up this conversation than that. That is that insight's just great. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your information. And I can't agree more than having those conversations and starting small and having a plan and talking and sharing and
Often.
understanding what's available and what support is and isn't in our communities because, as you mentioned, there's so many community support systems out there that we can lean into and look into and have. And Mountain Aging Partners is just one of those amazing resources we have to age well at home. And we appreciate you coming today and sharing your
Appreciate you having
thoughts
me.
very, very much. And if you have any additional questions for Elizabeth or Carolina Living Choices regarding our Aging Well at Home series, please reach out to us by email or visit us online and let us know what you're thinking and what you would like to know from other professionals and experts like Elizabeth in our community.